Welcome to Inmate Tea with AMP. I'm your host, April, and on the line is my co-host, Pig, who is incarcerated in a North Carolina prison. And we are here with a special guest, Ramelle Kamack from California. Welcome, Ramelle.
What's up, April? What's up, Pig? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you. We're excited for you to give us a look inside prisons in California, as you are only our second. I think that's right, Pig. Second person to come on the podcast from California. So we're excited to hear about what you have to tell us about today.
Yeah, and I'm glad to be here. So the thing that I wanted to talk about, I have a big issue with the way that prison and prisoners are depicted on fictional entertainment. And what I mean by that is, if you typically watch a movie about prison or a TV show and it depicts a scene in prison, the overwhelming majority of the time a riot is happening, somebody's getting stabbed, somebody's getting raped, and that's just not what goes on a day-to-day basis. Right? It's actually quite different. And I think that the fictional depiction of what happens in prison is affecting us in real life.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that depiction causes this misconception that allows the public out here to, one, not understand at all about prison. And so then there's also a lack of compassion that people have for people that are incarcerated. So I think that it's important to talk about these things. And I just thank you for coming on to bring all this to the forefront to educate our viewers on this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're welcome. But for me, it's a cause that's very dear to me. On a day-to-day basis, you have guys in here. Most people don't know that we have 9 to 5 jobs in here. You know, we're like, for me personally, I work in an auto body shop. You have guys that go to college, guys that are in culinary. So we live a very busy life. And on top of that, we also attend self-help groups. We teach classes. We have families of our own and issues, just like the common person in society. And the overwhelming majority of people in here, when we get here, we realize that we made mistakes. We've made bad decisions, and we harm people, and we want to do better. And I think that narrative that, you know, prisoners, that when we leave here, we're still dangerous, we can't be trusted, that affects not just us, but affects the general population as well. And for me personally, I decided to do something about it.
Okay.
Ramelle, if I could just touch on this, you know, you made a comment just then that, you know, people in society, they look at us when we're released or when we're asking for pardons and paroles and commutations of our sentences to gain parole or release. They look at us as dangers to society. They look at us as someone that's going to go out here and commit another crime or do something to somebody because of this depiction that the media and the TV shows place on us, this stigma that we are living under. And it's like an umbrella. We live under this umbrella, and we're trying to get out from up under this umbrella, but they're holding us because of these depictions. And people don't realize that we're actually going to school in here. There's some of us that's getting education. There's some of us that have come in here with no education and obtained an education and has done everything they can do to prepare themselves for society and be an acting and achieving member and contributing member to the community and society as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. You know, one of the main reasons or the purposes of the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation is so we can correct our behavior, so we can rehabilitate and then re-enter society as productive members. Now, I'm not going to diminish, you know, the crimes that we did commit. You know, many of us in here, we have hurt people and have hurt the community. But that's who we were coming in. But while we're in here, we're working to improve. We're working to be better people and to re-enter society and to contribute to society. So one of the things that I decided to do was to write about it, to write about my experience. And I've done that in the form of journalism. And I was able to take the narrative back. Instead of, you know, perpetuating that false narrative that, you know, we're dangerous, you know, we can't be trusted, we're gonna hurt you, I decided to write about what actually transpires in prison. And, you know, I've been getting a lot of positive feedback from it. I was getting published by colleges, universities, magazines, and recently I was even rewarded for my contribution.
Okay.
So in California, they have a law. It's called Penal Code 1172.1, and what it does is it rewards the incarcerated population for our exceptional conduct. And so how it works is it allows the staff here at this prison, whether it be a correctional officer, doctor, dentist, whoever, if they notice something about an incarcerated person and they say, hey, this guy, he's the exception. He's productive, he's positive, he's responsible, that they can actually get our name and refer us to the warden. And if the warden agrees that, hey, you're right, that this guy, he is, the exception, and they review our prison file, they review our disciplinary record, of what we're doing to contribute to society, then it goes to the secretary, the California Department of Corrections, and then from there, if he agrees, then it goes back to the trial court, and they actually remove years off of our sentence.
Wow, that is amazing.
Whoa, yes, it is.
Yes, right. And so I was very proud that to be seen, because sometimes in prison you can feel that like you're forgotten,
Yeah.
So that even if you're striving to be a better person, people still look at you as, that crime that you committed 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so some of the things that they recognized was my education. While in prison, I earned 3 college degrees. They recognized the letters of support and laudatory chronos from correctional officers that vouched that, that I'm reformed, I'm a good person. They looked at the jobs that I've had in here. I've worked as an electrician, as a welder, as an educational clerk, as a TA. Right now, I'm working at auto body. They recognize all of that and the extensive self-help classes that not only am I taking, but that I facilitate as well, such as like anger management, addressing criminal thinking, and things of that nature. But the icing on the cake was when they recognized my writing, and I was so proud. And they actually cut my time in half. And it's a big step forward. So I'm not finished, but yeah, it felt good.
Wow, Ramelle, that's amazing in itself.
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard of a program that allows that, because see, for myself, I'm working on filing a commutation, and I have went to officers that I know that I work with daily and asked them, hey, can you write me a letter of recommendation? And they're like, no, we're not permitted to do this. They can't even write a letter of recommendation and give it to the superintendent, and the superintendent writes something on my behalf. I've been to the superintendent, and it's like pulling chicken's teeth. So you're saying that these officers, the doctors, dentists, anybody can see the good that you're doing and write a letter of recommendation to the superintendent and be like, hey, this man's case deserves a review. And then they can send it to the Secretary of Prison and pretty much get you a review of your case and get your time cut substantially to allow you to go back into society early, because you're showing your state of rehabilitation, that you're doing something to rehabilitate your time and be a productive member of society. And that is amazing, man. They don't do that in North Carolina.
Yeah, I really want to commend the prison system there in California for this, because it's so great. I wish the other states would take notice of this, and implement it in other states as well, because you're talking about something like in psychology called operant conditioning, where you're using positive and negative reinforcement to correct behaviors. And that's what corrections is, trying to correct the negative behaviors. But they're using this negative force, it seems like, all the time. Correctional staff is always taking your privileges, taking your money for you doing something wrong. They're always taking, but they're missing the positive reinforcement of operant conditioning. And that is giving for the desired behavior that you want from somebody. That's great that they've, take notice of this and implemented this in California.
I want to talk about something that you had mentioned, Pig, about how, the free staff or the correctional officers in North Carolina, how, some of them might be willing to, but, just that law doesn't exist.
Uh-huh.
In California, even though that, the law exists where, it allows them to refer somebody who they feel is the exception, a lot of staff are still hesitant or afraid to do it. And the reason why they're afraid is reasonable, is because they don't want to contribute to somebody getting out and then harming somebody again. But the recidivism rate in California, especially for lifers who get out, is less than 1%. So not too many people, but they actually get out and they contribute to society. They work on developing skills in here where we can get jobs, entry-level jobs, or for a lot of us, even a career when we get out. And that's the furthest thing from our mind is coming back to prison. But as I said at the beginning, that false narrative that's been perpetuated over and over and over again, that you can't trust us, that we're going to harm somebody if given the opportunity. It allows the population to view us in a different light. It contributes to prejudice, and it's actually going contrary to what the law was intended for.
Yes, and see, that is something that's amazing that you just brought this up. The narrative is painted around people with life and long-term sentences. They paint us as these monsters. They paint us as people that'll go out there and, like Ramelle said, reoffend. But it's been proven that somebody that spends 15 to 20, 30 years in confinement, refining theirself and reforming theirself and learning a trade to apply theirself outside of prison is the one that's less likely to reoffend. But these guys that's coming in here, and they call them skid bitters, short timers. They'll come in, they'll have a year, 6 months, 5 years, and they won't get no education. They don't get no kind of work experience, and they go out there and you see them come back within 6 months of their release. And the first thing they say is, oh, it's hard out there. I couldn't get a job. But there's so many programs that they offer these guys, and these are the people that the system focuses on. They say nonviolent crimes or short timers, or if you got a violent crime but you didn't get much time. I don't knock it, but I'm just saying, when you got a person that's got a substantial amount of time, take the time to review their case and say, hey, what has this man done? What has he done with his time while he's been in prison? Do you think he has reformed himself? Do you think he could be a productive member of society? And what you've done, Ramelle, with yourself, it's been noticed. And I commend you on that, because you are shining a light on yourself, but you're letting the world know that, hey, there is hope. There is redemption. Even though I got this amount of time, I can redeem myself, and I can show you that I can do better today than I was yesterday.
Right. And I like how you frame that, especially when you talked about basically our contribution to the narrative that the public is fed. And so, some guys that come in here that have, short time, some of them don't have enough time to reflect or to think about, the impact that their crime had on society and others. And that's not to give them any type of excuse by any means. Prison doesn't make us reform. That they don't force us to rehabilitate. That's up to each individual.
Yes.
So whether somebody has short time or they have a long time, it needs to come from within. It's up to the individual to see, like, hey, I don't want this for myself. I don't want this for me, for my family, for anybody. It's up to us to develop remorse and to make those changes. And just going back to what I mentioned at the beginning, just sometimes how what we're fed, whether it's through culture or through TV or some other form of entertainment. Because when I first came to the county jail, I wasn't remorseful at all. In fact, I looked at coming to jail as like a rite of passage, as like, when I get out one day, then I'll have street cred and I'll be admired and things like that. And again, it's just that story that's been told over and over again as far as like what does jail and prison represent, you know? Some people actually, you know, go get out from prison and they re-enter society, and, you know, they talk about how tough it is, but they also will glorify prison as well. And so that's a story or a narrative that, you know, that harms us as well. Now, I think that it's time for a more accurate and a more productive, you know, depiction of what actually occurs in here. And I think that will lead to laws like we have in California that rewards our exceptional conduct. Hopefully, like other states will look at that and they'll model, you know, their laws after that. But like I said, it starts with us, the individuals in here, and we don't have to feel hopeless, but we actually can do something about it. And for me, like I told you, for me, it was through my writing, through my journalism.
Yeah. And, you know, that is me and April's objective when we're on these podcasts. When our whole objective with this podcast is to change the narrative of what happens in prison. We're not here to bash North Carolina prison, California prison, and no other. We're here to shine a light on what's going on. And maybe, just maybe, one person that has an influence to make a change can say, hey, you know, these people's on to something. Let's look at what we got going on. And let's look at our module and see if we can better our module and make it more productive for someone that's going back into society. And like you said, you know, some of these guys come in here and they don't have time enough to reflect. So they need to be put in programs that help them reflect on what they have done, learn to look within themselves and see, you know, the flaws, the mess ups. Where did I mess up? Where did I go wrong? How did I hurt this person? Well, how did these drugs end me up in prison? What happened? You know, and they take that time to reflect, self-reflection. And then once you self-reflect, then you begin to grow, because that's what helped me change. When I come into prison, I was not the man that you are talking to today. I was a kid that was lost with no direction. And I was angry not only at myself, but I was angry at my mom. I was angry at my dad. I was angry at the judge. I was angry at the community. I was angry at everybody. And I felt like nobody didn't owe me nothing, but I felt like it was me against the world. So I had to learn to look into myself and figure out, hey, what is wrong with you? Why do you continuously do the things that you do? So when I learned to do that, I learned to heal and love myself. And I couldn't love nobody else until I loved myself. And a lot of these young men and young women that's coming into prison does not take the time to do that. That is something that you've done, Ramelle. And there's others that's doing the same thing. And, you know, a lot of those young men and young women that come in here, they look to people like you and I to guide them, to give them guidance. I have young guys that come to me all the time, and I'll set them down and I'll talk to them for hours. And they call me, they'll be like, oh, I need some therapy time. And, you know, sometimes it gets on my nerves, but sometimes I see the benefit in it because I see the change in these guys. And I'm pretty sure you do the same thing.
Yeah, I do. You know, one way that I do that is by means of self-help programs and facilitating classes, self-help classes for guys that are, you know, just coming to prison, and, you know, some of them have been here for a while. But I think they're so critical. More programs that prison offer, and I think that the more hope that a person has and the more value that a person has, or they can look at themselves, you know, with more value. And what I mean by that is, you know, some people may have so many years. Some of these guys that come here may have 100 years, right? So they may not even be thinking about physical freedom immediately. You know, they just know that they want something better, or that you know, that they know that they still have potential or some type of value about themselves. So they're looking for some type of confirmation, and programs, they offer that. When I first came to prison, I had 82 years with a life sentence, and so I wasn't even thinking about going home, you know. But I knew that my parents raised me to be better than, you know, the behavior that I've exhibited before in the past. I knew that I still had value. I knew that I was still worth something, you know. And actually, I started to go to college through the mail, through correspondence courses, and I started to attend self-help groups, and it was just like a light bulb had clicked inside my mind. I realized that, hey, guess what? I'm not the only person that wants something better. Even if it doesn't matter if we're going home or not, but we won't allow our circumstances to determine our worth or who we are as a person.
Yes.
You know, and one of the ways I did that was through self-help programs, forming that camaraderie with others. And years later, I had no idea that California would make a law that rewards our productive and good behavior. But once that law came into effect, I had already accomplished so much, and I was rewarded for that without the incentive of going home. It was just I wanted something better for myself, and it ended up paying off in a big way.
Absolutely.
Yes. And, you know, Ramelle, that in itself just speaks of your character. That speaks of the man you are, the values your mom and dad instilled in you. And, you know, that just shows that you want to feel good about yourself. In the morning when you wake up, you look in that mirror, you can say, hey, man, you made a difference. And a lot of the times when you're in a situation like you and I, that makes the difference in my day. When I can talk to April and she's going through something and I can help her. Or she can say, hey, I know somebody that needs your help. And when you look this up on the law library and I can help them better their life, or I can help someone in here, or I can help an officer. It doesn't matter who it is. If I can help them and shine light on their day and see them smile, it changes my whole outlook on life. Because there's days that I wake up and I'm like, damn, what am I good for? What am I here for? And then I'll have somebody to come by and be like, you know, man, you told me something yesterday that changed my whole outlook. You helped me.
Yeah.
I may call April. Yeah. She'd be like, hey, man, hey, Tig, you said something yesterday or you done something that changed my whole day. And, you know, that is my whole reason. That's my whole reason. And I understand by talking to you, I can see and I can hear the compassion that you have, not only for the people that you're locked up with, but those that's outside. Every person that you come in contact with, you try to make a difference in that person's life in some way.
Yeah, thank you for recognizing that. And I do. You mentioned compassion, and that's so dear to me, you know, to show that to others. And one of the reasons why, because I was shown compassion, you know, that when I first came to jail, you know, I was a knucklehead too. I was ignorant and thought that I knew everything. But it was a couple of people, you know, in my life that they didn't give up on me, you know, and not just people out there in society. I mean, people in here. Just like what you said, guys that have been in here for a while and look to help, you know, somebody else, to show them that, hey, somebody cares. And just the effect that can have. For me, that's a reflection of what I call living amends, which means I'm living in a way that shows that I'm remorseful. And I want to give back to the community. And that means any person that I come across. Now, as you mentioned, it could be just, you know, a kind word here. It doesn't have to be some, you know, drastic or, you know, a big gesture. But, you know, just asking somebody, how's your day or how are you? It can have a profound effect. Yeah. But a more formal way that we do that, or that I personally do that, is through the self-help programs. So I have a pretty hectic schedule, but one self-help program that's dear to me is addressing criminal thinking, anger management, as well as alternatives to family violence. For most of the guys that I meet in prison, we come from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different ages, different cultures, and things like that. But one thing that I find that the majority of us have in common is that we were raised in a violent household or in a violent community or in a violent environment. And it affected us. You know, we start to normalize that and feeling like, you know, hey, this is our best option for me to handle my problems in my neighborhood, is to be like them as opposed to be a target of them or to be a victim. But even at that time, you know, we've seen the benefit of that, and we may not have had the courage. And so now that we're in prison, you know, we see that we all have that background in common, and that allows us to have empathy. For me to have empathy for somebody that's just coming in who may, you know, still be leaning towards being violent, that, you know, maybe I can help this person and let him know that I understand. And for the majority of my life, especially growing up, that was like a nagging feeling that I had. And I didn't express that to my parents or my friends, but I felt like didn't anybody truly understand what I was going through, what I was feeling on the inside. And that was a very lonely feeling. And, through the self-help programs where it's a group of incarcerated people and we're discussing, our history and our topics and productive solutions, then it's like I realized that, hey, I'm not the only one that experienced this, that, hey, there's other people who do understand what I went through, who understand what I'm going through now. And so for me to be able to offer that to somebody else, it had a big impact on my life, and it really makes my day when somebody, thanks me for helping them to connect the dots in their life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things that you touched on was your education, your use of education to build a platform through journalism and fictional writing as an author. Could you tell us about some of your books? How many books do you have?
So I write short stories and journalistic pieces for online content or through magazines. I've been published maybe upwards of about 20 times. And the first outlet who gave me a genuine opportunity was Columbia University. And for anybody who's aspiring to be a journalist or a writer or a novelist, like Columbia University is as big as it gets. That's like our version of Mecca, Mm-hmm. So when they published me, they published this fictional story that I wrote called La Familia. And it just reaffirmed that, hey, you're on the right path. That you're good at this, continue to work on your craft. And I've done so. I first started to write because I've seen the need to at least try to have an impact out there in the community, to try to inspire change. And it was around the time of Trayvon Martin, Ahmaud Arbery, Freddie Gray at the time of their killing. And, I wanted to help. I wanted to contribute in some kind of way, but I just didn't know what could I do. And I was talking to another individual, and we were just kind of just going back and forth and just thinking, like, what can we do? Where can we help? And one of the things that I came up with, I said, well, I don't like the way that we're represented on TV. And I was just talking about black men in general. We're not all angry, violent, promiscuous, drug dealers, gun-toting, guys. When that story is repeated over and over again, I think, people, they watch that, they see that, and then they use that small case sample to generalize, all black men act the same way. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And so, I think that when we are walking down the street with the hoodie on, or when we are pulled over by the police, then that's the first thing that a lot of people, they think of. They prejudge us without even knowing it. This guy is dangerous, And so I started to write fiction to take back, that narrative, to recreate my own and show a genuine and authentic, narrative. And so I started to write fiction, and I got a lot of positive feedback from people who I was allowing to read it, and then I started to get published more and more. And I was talking to people of different demographics, and they kind of echoed that sentiment, that they didn't like the way that they're depicted, in literature or on TV and things like that. Not all Latinas are angry and run off at the mouth. Not all black women are opportunists and things like that. And so with their permission, I asked them, like, hey, I'm working on a story, can I base this character or this story off of, your experience, And I was able to work hand in hand with people and to not only tell my story, but to tell other people's story as well, who feel like they're underrepresented, or when they are represented on TV, it's just a derogatory stereotype that affects them in real life. So my latest project is I'm telling my personal story, and that's on this website called passionoftheweiss.com, and that's spelled WEISS. I'm working with a journalist, and he's given me the opportunity to tell excerpts of my life. And so, I'm passionate about it, and, please go check it out.
Okay. Well, we will put that down in the description of this video for our viewers to find easily. Will they be able to access your other books there as well?
Yeah, pretty much. If you just Google my name, Ramelle Kamack, Kamack, a lot of my work will pop up. Some of the people that I work with is colleges and universities, Stony Brook University and Cloud State University in Columbia. Those are just a few amongst others, but yeah. You check out my work, and then if you feel like how I feel, that you like to see your demographic represented in a more tasteful and positive light, share your story with me, and I would love the opportunity to make you proud.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And I just wanted to say that this interview and speaking with you it's been a really a breath of fresh air, I guess I could say, because we so many times get caught up talking about what's wrong, because there is a lot wrong with the prison systems and the judicial systems, and it's easy to talk about what's wrong, but it's not always every day that we get somebody on that wants to talk about what's right with it. And I think that is important to talk about those things, and we really appreciate you coming on to share this with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I had a ball, and thanks for providing us with this platform.
Absolutely.
And discuss about we'll talk about reform. So thank you so much.